Welcome to my tutorial today on debunking, and today we'll be debunking Gettysburg Ghost, most authentic video to date. So I've already captured a few things from here, saved some time, but I'll go over those areas that I've captured again, and we can look at them on the screen. Like, for example, I wanted to record, he does two things. He zooms in on the area of the ghost, which makes him bigger for us. That's nice. We can do a few tricks to make him even bigger yet. So I took a picture at the beginning before the ghosts showed up, and I took one after the ghosts have all showed up and at the end, because I want to show you a comparison technique which can show you things moving. So it's a way to look at it, and this effect also will show up artifacts. When we normally think of color, most of us just think of RBG, red, blue, green, and colors, but there's that's 24 bits for 32 some million colors, and there's an extra bit, 8 bits of data that's used to record things like transparency, or depending on your program how it does it, transparency or intensity. If not intensity, then the luminescence and brightness, which is automatically kind of encoded into RGB, but later we can separate luminescence from the color, because that's the one that's going to tell us. The luminescence is what makes up the shading of the thing, and as a joke, we are talking about shades. So alright, so here's the beginning before the ghosts appear, and here's a picture of the same scene after he's all done. And we're going to look at those two. So let's begin by talking about frame rate. So the things we'll be talking about is frame rate, compression, transparency, and intensity, or luminescence. So frame rate. First, we want to establish what the actual frame rate is going on with the camera that recorded this. We can't really tell the difference between the camera frame rate and the frame rate of the app that was used to convert it into a video. I used MP4 because if I don't get a fast enough frame rate during the conversion of the original video, which I already got right here, and I'm going to put that into the little frame so we can look at it. So I can change the frame rate at which I convert the video so that I can get enough frames so that I can evaluate properly the camera and that. But all I really need to do is be able to capture at a faster rate than the animation. If the animation and the camera are at the same frame rate, it's going to be harder to find. If it's somewhere less than that, we'll see some transitioning occurring effects, which is in a way good for us, because the programs or applications, when they convert two separate sources, they tend to make some mistakes. So same frame rate captures is important, plus the method by which the data is stored is important, and we can take advantage of the fact that this data can be stored if two different methods are used to create any part of the video whatsoever. We'll skip over the text part because it's really hard to debug text or debunk text. There's really nothing wrong with it. It's usually made by the video editor. So we go to that. So what we are interested in, though, is we're interested in the section that has really rapid movement, because we can see the image shift with each frame. So let's every time I hit the right key, it moves forward a frame. As you see down below, you see it moving forward and backwards. We can see that basically this camera clearly, or at least the frame rate at which I captured, is definitely capturing single frames with motion in it every time. So if we see some frames that don't have a lot of motion or don't have any motion at all really, we're going to be able to tell that something else is going on. What we ideally would like to see, if it was perfect and everything was real and there was no fakery involved or any adding additional data, we'd see this. We'd see every step movement showing a change in the image, just like I am now. We can also expand this, and with my clicks we can see the image change with every movement, and we do. So I have it definitely high enough so far. I have, like I said, I had to do this again, so I definitely know that I have it fast enough in order to capture the ghosts. In order to magnify this effect, one of the things I like to do when capturing the actual anomalies and when evaluating is I will use a feature called half speed, where I can reduce the speed to half. And so let me show how that actually shows up in the same area we were looking at, kind of with the pathway. There we go. So every movement doesn't cause a change. See? So it's movement, no movement, movement, no movement, movement, no movement, movement, no movement. So every other frame. And that's how it manages to get it at half speed, because it just duplicates the frame. So when we go to where the ghosts are located later on in the video, we'll skip over the part where they're really tiny and we can't really see them very well, which is right here during this section. And you look down there at the end of the road and you'll see some ghosts show up down here as they move across the screen as I move the video through. There they are. In fact, we can even, now that we're doing this, we'll just go ahead and make it bigger so it makes it easier for them to be seen. We can see that there's ghosts moving across the road. Quote, ghosts, unquote. There goes another one. Some disappear in the middle of the road, some disappear, some appear in the middle, some appear and go. They all seem to disappear before they end up in the field over here. I don't know why they're afraid of everything but the road, but actually that's a joke because he put limiters on it so they would not appear in front of parts of things they shouldn't be. In other words, if they're walking down the middle of halfway between here to be front of the weeds or the fence or whatever that is, and all the way down at the end of the road here, we don't want them walking in front of this part, which is closer. So he has to put limits around it whenever he's displaying it, because he doesn't want them walking in it. So he'll have to make them disappear before they get to that point where they show up in front of something, because that would look hokey. That's obviously an error, and I think anybody could spot that one really quick. So we don't want to make that mistake. So we're going to move down to the video where the ghosts actually appear. And he moves the camera up closer. We just saw some actions from the wind in the trees. If you look up in here, you can see the wind in the trees blowing the leaves, which that's normal to be expected out on any kind of day. It's hard to get a day that has nothing moving. Ideally, if you're going to make fakes, you don't want nothing moving, except for the ghosts. If anything else moves, you've got problems, because they won't interact with the ghosts right. You'll see later. Alright, here we've zoomed in on it. So the two pictures that I took that I showed you was taken, one was taken about right here. That's this one. And then the other one was taken near the end before the other credits show up, and that's this one. As you see, they look pretty much alike. Alright, so we got our frame rates. Now we want to go where the ghosts were, so I'm going to move forward until we see ghost movement. And that's where I started capturing before. Okay, so there the camera will settle down finally completely. And we wait for the ghost to show up. Oops, I'm in the wrong one. It'll never get there that way. That's frame by frame. Here, let's go up here. There they are. Now this guy here, see, he walks all the way across the road. That's ideal. In fact, I know he's ideal. He shows a number of really odd features. So in order to cut back on how much work we're doing, I'm just going to go ahead and split the video here before he shows up. And I'm going to delete the section here where it's all the introductory titles. Alright, so we're moving past where the ghost, and now he's going to come out. And I could clean that up and make it smaller, but this is good enough. And then we want to take him to where he disappears. Alright, so we're only going to look at one ghost. One ghost should be plenty to tell us if something's funky going on. So let's split it here, and we're going to delete the last half. Part of it, we don't need any of that. We just need the part where we got a ghost going across the screen. Let's take a look at that. You'll see it starts at the beginning, goes to the end. We have a little bit of video coming over my microphone. or audio, I mean. There's the ghost. He's walking across. Now, if this was exactly half, like we had done before, oh, it's still cut at half, so we are looking at half. Well, great. So let's find out when it cut it, how it interpolated, if it did, or we should have actually have frames that look exactly the same. So let me look at this and see. Well, we really aren't going to tell. There's nothing moving, so that's why I picked the moving spot before. So let's get ghosts moving in here. Turn this so we can see it. I took these pictures. It's of this very same ghost at different spots as he walked along. We can do one more trick right now we want to do. In order to see this better, we can crop it. And I will do this at 16:9 because that's what it's at. And that'll keep this frame. If I did it manually, I could modify it. See, I could make it like only do widthwise instead. You know, we don't want that. We want to keep the picture filled up. So we'll make a square about big enough to cover the whole road and the whole ghost scene so we can see him from beginning to end. Don't need to capture that much into the field. He disappears well before that. It looks like he's being framed so that he disappears, so he doesn't show up in front of the closer. Yeah, I'm already talking about him like it's not a real ghost, because it isn't. Alrighty, let's just look at that. We'll take that as a view. I don't like it. It's a little bit lopsided. Yeah, okay, I'm picky like that. One of them detail people. There we go. Alright, now we got a bigger image of it. Let's just look at this thing full speed. Yeah, it's a little blurry, but that's what happens when you magnify no information. And there he is. I can already tell by looking at him. He's got a lot of problems. He's got little boxes around him, and yeah. Problem when you mix two different compressions, like for example, when the actual video of this animation was made, and then it was added to this, it was probably compressed. I mean, let's face it. Most of us can't afford the machines or the memory to sit there and do a completely lossless video like Hollywood does. In Hollywood, they don't do compression anything. I don't know if they ever do it at all. Tends to not work in their favor. They can afford to sit there and make it lossless during the entire process. Lossless doesn't have a lot of the problems that this does. So if you can make a video lossless, you're going to start getting into the realm of more difficult. But if you, like Hollywood, develop your own software, you know exactly what the bits that aren't representing color, like that are transparency, you can set it to a specific bit. If you want to deal with luminescence, you can set it to a specific bit. When you mask things, you can set them to a specific bit. So, yeah. Hollywood has that ability to do that. They don't sell their software. It's proprietary, and every animation studio and probably everywhere in the world probably uses their own proprietary methods for good reasons, because you don't see any of this junk show up like this. But we are relegated to living with stuff that's been set to specific values by somebody else who decided what they would be. If you're a programmer, you could get into making something where you'd have control over all of it. I guess programmers come in black hats and white hats, so no telling whether or not they'd make something like that or not. So let's look at that nice big image again. Remember, I've already got him at half speed, so he's not moving as fast as he would. Of course, the faster they move, the more it looks like there's nothing wrong. But see, we can already see there's some kind of square here. Up there it was. Look at that. You see that? There's obviously some kind of square here that's set up around the edges of the field. He doesn't mind him walking in front of this. So he's got something set up here. Maybe he misjudged it. He's also got something set up over here too. It's like a frame in a frame. Obviously he's got to carry the whole frame over for if he's going to walk this far. But if you have a frame in the background, maybe there's cars passing by, who knows why they did that. It almost looks like that was inserted in there. If I look at it, I almost see an entire frame around this thing here. I'm pretty sure it's not an illusion. There's a reason why it stands out and it bugs the eye, because there's something just not quite natural about it. But anyway, let's ignore that. But it'll show up. In fact, it shows up in here. And let's move back and look at that actual stuff. Let's look at where the ghost walks over and actually look at it frame by frame, count his frame rates. See how many frames he has to do. I'm going to step it out here temporarily so you can actually see me counting. Alrighty, so he's moving across. So we're going to go, we'll move him till he moves, and then we'll count. There was a movement. 1, 2, up. Well, that was a half a movement. Oh, part of his head's gone already. Oh well. 1, 2, 3, 4. Up, there was a movement. 1, 2, 3, 4. That wasn't a movement. It was a fuzzle. That can happen if something was moving, like maybe the breeze caught something. 1, 2, up there. I guess he moved there. So it's like it's like between 4 and 6, or 3 and 6. Depends on how it captures each frame. It can be off a little bit whenever you marry the two different frame rates. So 1, 2, 3, 4. There he moved. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, that's definitely movement. 1, 2, 3, 4. I guess maybe that was a movement. That was a movement. That movement. As you see, it's more than every other frame. You get odd little things going in here because of this frame splitting that occurs. This frame splitting wouldn't occur that we see in here, where he keeps getting little lines down the middle. They could be caused by the frame rate being different than the number of frames that he made of the animation. For example, if you made 25 frames of animation, but you're recording it at 10 frames of animation, or you're recording it, it doesn't matter if it's even more than whatever you originally made it at. Each frame won't have a unique picture. It can capture a piece of one and then the next one. It's definitely indicative of an interference that's being caused by differing frame rates. That's why you count it and it doesn't come out the same all the time. So we know that the original camera changes every 2. So 1, 2. There's a new one. 1, 2. Not really, but we see blebbing going on. Blebbing is what I refer to as artifacts from compression techniques. 1, 2, no movement. 1, there was a movement. 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. So when the frames rates are different, sometimes you'll catch one every 2, but then you'll catch one every 3, and maybe every 4 or 5 or so to make up for it, depending on how much he's moving. There's 3 and movement, 4. Already we can't hardly tell what he is, but he's definitely got some weird stuff going on in here. Plus, if you look real close, you can see a box sort of in front of him, like right here and right behind him. This is the actual frame that was inserted that contains the ghost. So you have a frame around the actual animation itself. You have the frame which represents the frame in which he's going to be showing up in as he moves across. So this would be, in computer technical term, the movable object block that represents the character, like in a video game. This is the block that represents the character. This is the frame that represents the video screen. And this back here, somewhere around here where it actually goes into these edges of can represent a frame that deals with what he can walk in front of and what he can't. Those kind of things, depending upon his location. Frames within frames, all doing their jobs. Because I really suspect this is just a still image back here. He didn't want it moving at all. It could really mess things up. So he tries to keep it from moving. So where we're going to really see stuff happening is whenever it comes in contact with edges. So let's go ahead and move through it frame by frame. There we go. And it's moving frame by frame. We can obviously see something's going on with the shapes. A lot of the shaping we can ignore because it's just the kind of effect you get from compression techniques. So they could be. We'll see some compression errors in here that we should ignore because they would show up even in anything that was moving, and we can ignore those. But where we really get into it is whenever we see things like this. Here it blew them out completely. And when it blows them out like that because of the compression, you stand a good likely of being able to capture the entire frame that contains the character in it. It won't be really visible much, and I'll go into that later why it's not that visible, because it actually all is representing a transparency. But like I said, the extra, other than 24 bits of the original, in this case it's probably grayscale, but it could be, it does look a little bluish maybe. But you got the extra 8 bits because usually we store the data in 32 or 64 bits, and those extra bits that don't represent the color can be used to represent other features. Right now, most of the software we use uses for video 24 bits for the color, and then the extra 8 bits can represent things like transparency and luminescence and masking and other things like that. And in Hollywood, who knows what they use those bits for. But they don't mix well because each application doesn't know how to handle that extra data. Look at that. His head completely disappeared right here. And stuff. So what I did is, where there's a lot of this going on, I'm hoping to capture the frame that it's located in. And so I took pictures of it. So let's look at what we do have. I grabbed one here with him in the middle, and then one that was a little bit after. You see that he's blown out a little bit. So I want to look at the difference between when he's not blown out and when he is blown out, because that's more likely to show us a frame if one exists. Let's see where the next one is. The next one is here. Oh, as he's passing off, he exhibits an unusual behavior. So here, let me go ahead and magnify this so it's a lot easier to see. And you'll notice that this edge here goes up. Sometimes you can just define those edges as occurring because of the scanning of the, all charge coupled devices and CMOSs that are used by cameras cause scan lines. And if a frame is broken at a scan line, you'll see a vertical or a horizontal break, but you won't see them both because they don't scan diagonally. They scan either vertically or horizontally. Like if you're holding your camera one way, it would scan horizontally, and if you're holding your camera straight up and down because you oriented it in another different direction, then it might scan up and down, or the opposite of whatever it was doing the other way. But you would never see them both together. And here we have an interesting phenomenon. This is them both together. I suspect that this one here is the one that's behind the road that we see. Notice how it only shows up a little bit when we don't have something in front of it, but as soon as we put this other image in front of the other, whatever this square represents, we start getting unusual combination effects. The applications, when they combine them, don't quite know what to do with that extra data and stuff, and it shows up as artifacts like this. Most of them will render them into color references. Even if it has a transparency, it has to represent something. So I'd almost guess that he's got a bigger one representing a still image of the road in the back, and a smaller one representing the other side of the road, and doing techniques like that, which would be really great because if they don't move at all, they stand less of a chance to interfere, but where they do interfere will be at their edges. So here we go with that. We're moving from one image to another image, and we see it breaking up. And if we move forward, trying to move one frame at a time. Oh, that's right, this was the still of it. Sorry about that. So let's go and look for it in the actual video again. So here we are here. Let's zoom him so we can see him better. And we see that happening a little bit here as he moves forward. And let's look for that spot that I actually captured, where he's going to move to this line here. We see this line here where there's a dividing line. He put it right up against the edge of the weeds here so that it wouldn't disappear. But if you actually look, it extends up into the woods too. That's not an illusion. That's actually there. There is a difference between the right side and the left side. I won't go into it later when I do the debunking, but I actually compare the color ranges here, or the intensity of the ranges here and here, and there's definitely a defining line between the two, and a difference in shading on the two areas. One's duller and dimmer than the other side. So anyways, let's move him, walk him to that line and watch it. Oh, there's a line there. Well, it's not possible to know everything that's going on in there for sure, but it's definitely conflicting with something or it wouldn't show up. And then move him forward, and sure enough, there he goes. He starts splitting up because of the edges, which I expected. And we move him forward, and he's back whole again, kind of. It's actually a marriage between the previous picture and this one. But there's that vertical line, and then there's the horizontal one. That one definitely indicates that we're dealing with two different things making the image, for sure, with different frame rates and different scannings. For all we know, the camera's scanning vertical, and the animation is scanning horizontal, and the two of them just didn't work with each other, and that's why we get it breaking up. It's almost impossible to get scan rates to match up. But it doesn't mean you shouldn't see them. What you want to look for is anomaly, like where you see the two different scan rates or two scans at the same time. Because a scan can only occur once per frame. So, if you had a scan showing up over here, it would definitely indicate that there was a third device, or if you didn't see the first one, the second device application involved in creating the conversions over and doing the compression techniques and whatnot like that. They all end up scanning the data, and we move them off, and yeah, we see it. There's the back end of that little horizontal and vertical line. So it's definitely involving some frame that's behind the scene here. It's hard to figure out exactly what it is because we didn't make it. But we know that it's not supposed to be there. So we get back to here again, and these were the pictures I took. So I took that one in the middle, and definitely see the edges of the square back here. And I took the one after it. I like to take them right beside each other. I don't want them to get too far apart, because then we want to find subtle effects that occur from one frame to the next. We don't want to find things that occur across wide span of range frames, because somebody could say anything they want to explain why that happened. And then I took a picture with him here where he had the horizontal and the vertical line. And I took the one after it where he shows up kind of whole again. And then I think I took a couple more. There is another one where it's just totally vertical split. This is the kind where I'm saying you can't say because there's a single vertical line that it didn't involve a scan. Like if all we found were these single vertical lines in here, period, you could justify it as being the difference between one scan of the one frame and the next frame, and that well, you really wouldn't see them unless there was two different applications with two different scan rates other than the camera. Well, you could in the camera. You could see at least one scan line if it was all filmed with the camera and the video editor put the two of them together and managed to split it between scans when it made the image. So I take that back. But what you wouldn't see here is you look, the back of his head is clipped and the front of him is clipped. You don't see double scan lines unless, I'd say there's definitely at least 3 different devices that were used. When I say devices, I also mean applications. 3 different applications. One of them could be hardware, 2 of them could be hardware, 1 could be software, 2 software, whatever. But there are definitely 3 different things that were massaging these images before they're combined as a single video, and we can see all their effects. And this one's part of the road one. This one looks like it's related to maybe the grass one, and then of course you have the actual frame that the entire video is. So if he completely disappeared after this line, we know that it was related to where he set it up because he didn't want him walking in front of stuff. We know that this guy would definitely not be good if he walked in front of this stuff because it's further down the road. He's definitely lined up to walk somewhere in the middle of the weeds. I told that guy when he stood there back there and we recorded them walking across the road. That's my fault. I didn't line it up properly. Oh well. Just imagining conversation between the guy doing the editing. Oh well, they won't notice. Alright, so let's go ahead and move this. Okay, so let's move him forward and we see, let's look at where he starts to disappear. And yep, somewhere in the weeds. We don't walk him in front of him, although he is kind of, so we're blowing him out. We're getting rid of him. We're making him disappear right now. There we go. Now here's a perfect place to take an image, and that's exactly what I did. Because here, if he used some feature that's in a video thing like dissolve, because after all, maybe ghosts will dissolve. The only problem with a dissolve feature is it fills up only the area where the dissolving is occurring. In other words, if your image of your ghost was like, 40 pixels wide by 220 pixels tall, in this case, they're much smaller than that. Of course, that could have been part of the problem too by resizing them. But, so we'll say 40 pixels wide by 200 tall. Then you tell it to blow it up, and then you cut and paste it into something. The blow up's going to be cut off at the edges. It's going to expand out, and it won't go further into the atmosphere. And it'll make a defined edge around it. So it's really obvious that, when something like that is done, decide to get fancy in the middle of making your fake, and then you're going to end up getting caught at it because it's really easy. So, anyways, the ghost blew up. Let's go look at what that looks like in big scale. So he's dissolving now. Let's go back to where he's there. Let's see. So he walks over to where the dissolve is going to be. And, oh yeah, look at him blowing up. You can actually see parts of his head blown up over here, and yeah. So let's move forward, and he's pretty much fuzzed out. And I'm moving forward and moving forward and forward, and he's kind of gone. Although we did see there was some little remnant that finally, where was that at? There it is. You see a little bit of ectoplasm left over as he finally completely disappears in the next frame. Here, we'll walk that back and forth. There he's there. There he's gone. So we can make him go there, disappear, and come back again. It's very subtle. Definitely wouldn't notice this in a motion picture where it only takes up one of the frames, right? So, yeah, he's pretty much gone by now. So I was just moving back and forth across it so you could see over here him walking in and walking out of view. All right, so let's go evaluate these. So I'm going to call it, I got enough captured images to go out and do comparison techniques on. And now, of course, I think we got plenty of evidence to show that this is definitely debunked. There's no question about it. It's debunked. But let's go look at some techniques which we can use the information which is hard to see and make it so it's easier to see.